There's a version of you, right now, sitting somewhere in the future, 3 months into running Linux full-time, who is going to open a terminal window without thinking twice, fix a problem in under a minute that would have terrified you today, and quietly wonder why nobody just told them these 10 things on day one instead of letting them stumble into every one of them the hard way. And that person is exactly who this video is for, because I have run Linux as my only operating system for 12 years now, and in that time I have made almost every mistake it is possible to make. Broken systems I could have saved, lost files I could have kept, and burned entire weekends chasing problems that had 5-minute solutions I simply did not know existed yet. And every single time I post about this, the comments fill with the exact same sentence from people at every stage of this journey. From someone who installed their first distro yesterday to someone who has been running Arch for a decade. Some version of, I wish someone told me this when I started. So today I am finally building the definitive version of that list, combining 12 years of daily driving with the very best advice pulled from this community. Because whether you just made the jump last week or you are still standing at the edge deciding this is the video you need before you go one step further, and the first thing, the piece of advice that every single experienced Linux user arrives at independently, no matter how they got here, is this: pick a mainstream distro to start with. And I know exactly what is pulling you in the other direction, because you have already seen it, some stunning, minimalist, hand-tuned tiling window manager setup on your feed that looks like something out of a hacker movie, and some part of your brain is whispering that is where you should begin. And I need you to ignore that whisper completely, because in 2026, the data across every major comparison site and community poll says the same thing again and again. Linux Mint and Ubuntu remain the two most recommended starting points. And for very good reason. Mint feels immediately familiar if you're coming from Windows, a taskbar, and a start menu sitting exactly where your muscle memory expects them. So you are not relearning basic navigation on day one while also trying to learn an entirely new operating system underneath it. And Ubuntu carries the largest community and the deepest software library of any desktop distro that exists, which matters enormously the night you hit a wall at 11 p.m. and need to Google your way out of it, and both of these install in well under 30 minutes on modern hardware. Both come backed by years of guaranteed security updates, so you are not gambling with your stability while you are still learning where anything even is. And my advice goes one step further than just picking a mainstream option. Pick one and actually stay with it. Because the second thing on this list is the mistake that quietly wrecks more beginner momentum than almost anything else, which is distro hopping before you have even given your first system a real chance. And I understand the pull completely. The Linux ecosystem in 2026 has more genuinely excellent options than it has ever had. Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora, Zorin, Elementary, dozens more. A constant stream of new releases and new desktop environments flooding your feed and making the system you already have running feel instantly less exciting by comparison. But here is what actually happens. Every time you give in to that pull, you're not discovering something better. You are resetting your own progress back to zero, reconfiguring settings you already configured, reinstalling applications you already installed, relearning muscle memory you had already built. And my honest recommendation is to treat your main system the way you would treat a reliable daily driver car. Something you depend on and take care of, not something you trade in every time a shinier model catches your eye. And if the itch to experiment gets too strong to ignore, set up a second partition specifically for that curiosity. Or better yet, spin up a virtual machine using something like VirtualBox, so you can break things to your heart's content without ever putting your actual daily system at risk. And that idea, protecting your daily system, leads directly into the third thing, which is separating your personal files from your operating system at the partition level from the very beginning. Because when your home folder lives on its own partition, a broken update, a bad configuration change, even a full reinstall becomes a non-event instead of a catastrophe. Your documents and photos and projects simply sit there, untouched while you rebuild the system around them. And this single decision, made once at install time, quietly removes an enormous amount of future stress from your life. Which brings us to the fourth thing. And this one deserves an honest conversation rather than a quick checklist line. Seriously consider using a VPN, because if you made this jump specifically because you were uncomfortable with how much telemetry Windows or macOS quietly builds into their core experience, that exact same instinct should extend to how you browse once you are actually on Linux. Switching your operating system changes who controls your local machine, but it does not automatically change what your internet provider or the websites you visit can see about your traffic. A solid VPN encrypts that connection and masks your real location, and that matters for reasons well beyond privacy paranoia. Things like not having your data intercepted on public Wi-Fi, or reaching content that happens to be locked to a country you're not currently sitting in. And the Linux support situation for VPN providers has genuinely improved, so look specifically for one that is open source and independently audited, because that distinction matters far more than flashy marketing about server counts ever will. And that brings us to the fifth thing, and I cannot stress this one enough because it is the mistake that eventually trips up almost everyone. Backup, backup, backup. This comes up constantly in this community, and there is a reason it has basically become folk wisdom at this point. And there are really two separate things you need to think about here. First, system-level backups, which capture the actual state of your operating system and its configuration, so you can roll everything back if an update breaks something, or you make a change you end up regretting. Timeshift is the easiest entry point here, available through the software manager on most major distros, letting you create restore points manually before doing something risky or automatically on a schedule, so you can roll your entire system back to a known good state in a few clicks. And if you are running a distro on the Btrefs file system, you also get native snapshotting through tools like Snapper, which is even faster for large rollbacks. And second, just as important, your actual personal data, documents, photos, project files. And this is exactly where cloud storage earns its keep. But if you would rather keep things local, Ubuntu's built-in backup tool, or Deja Dup on other distros, handles straightforward personal file backups without requiring deep technical knowledge. And the honest truth is that at some point, something is going to go wrong on your system, and having a real backup routine already in place is the entire difference between a minor inconvenience and a genuinely bad day. Which leads into the sixth thing: centralize where you're actually getting your software from, because one of the things that catches new users off guard is just how many different ways there are to install software on Linux. And if you are not intentional about it, you can end up with a genuinely messy system pulling packages from a dozen inconsistent sources. And my recommendation, which lines up with what most of the Linux security community consistently advises, is to think of it as a priority ladder. Start with your distro's own official repositories, then move to sandboxed formats like Flatpak, which isolate applications from your core system, so a problematic app is far less likely to cause a system-wide issue. And FlatHub in particular has become a massive, well-maintained catalog, usually your best bet for newer or less mainstream apps that have not made it into your distro's default repos yet. And only after exhausting those options should you look at third-party repositories, with random standalone binaries downloaded from some website as an absolute last resort. And this is not about gatekeeping, it is about security. Because software from vetted sources gets patched and does not carry the same risk of unknowingly installing something malicious. And the seventh thing is one that surprises people. Learn just enough terminal to not be afraid of it. You genuinely do not need it day to day anymore. Graphical tools have gotten dramatically better across every major distro, but you should still learn the basics because it makes you far more capable the moment something goes wrong, and troubleshooting guides across this community are overwhelmingly written, assuming at least a little terminal familiarity. So start small, learn your distro's package management commands, apt on Debian-based systems like Mint or Ubuntu, DNF on Fedora, Pacman on Arch-based systems, and these follow a logical structure once you push past the initial unfamiliarity. And one habit worth building early: do not blindly copy and paste commands from random forum posts without understanding what they do. Type them out yourself. Look up what each flag is doing, because that habit alone will save you from running something destructive. And the eighth thing is one most beginners never consider until it bites them: set up a basic firewall, because Linux does not always ship with one active by default. And tools like UFW take about 5 minutes to enable through a couple of simple commands, or a graphical front end, closing off an entire category of risk you would otherwise be carrying silently. And the ninth thing solves a frustration almost every switcher runs into within their first week without understanding why it is happening. And it is a font substitution problem, because core Microsoft fonts like Calibri, Cambria, Times New Roman, and Arial are not included by default on most Linux distros for licensing reasons. The fix has two parts. First, install the Microsoft Core Fonts package, usually available through your distro's repositories under a name like TTFM Score Fonts Installer, which handles the classic fonts. And second, look into metric-compatible replacement fonts, engineered to match the exact character spacing and dimensions of their Microsoft counterparts, even though they are not the literal same font file. And once you have both installed, your document compatibility with anything coming out of Microsoft Office improves dramatically, and that persistent "why does my formatting always look wrong?" frustration basically disappears entirely. And the 10th and final thing is the one that actually ties every single other point on this list together: manage your expectations and genuinely enjoy the process. because this is the most important mindset shift for anyone making this switch in 2026. Do not expect every piece of software or every piece of hardware to work flawlessly the moment you boot up, because that is simply not a realistic expectation for any operating system, Linux included. Even with how dramatically hardware support has improved in recent years, Wi-Fi cards, specific printer models, and certain proprietary peripherals occasionally need a little extra configuration. And that is simply part of the territory. And the advice that consistently comes up from experienced users in this community is simple but important. Do not quit the moment something does not work perfectly in your first 5 minutes. Be patient, search for your specific issue, because the odds are overwhelming that someone else has already run into and solved the exact same problem. And this community's documentation and forum culture remains one of its genuine strengths even now. And beyond pushing through the friction, actually enjoy learning this system, because one of the things that makes Linux fundamentally different from the operating systems most of us grew up on is the sheer degree of control you have over how your machine behaves. You're not working inside someone else's predetermined vision of your desktop. You have almost total agency to shape it into exactly what works for you. And that is a genuinely rare thing in modern computing, worth appreciating rather than pushing through as fast as possible. And that is the full list, 10 things that collectively represent years of trial and error, community wisdom, and honestly, a fair number of mistakes I made myself early on that I'm hoping this saves you from repeating. And if you are sitting there right now trying to decide whether this is the right moment to actually make the jump, here is my honest read heading into the back half of 2026. The distros have never been more polished, hardware support has never been broader, and the community resources waiting for you when you get stuck have never been more extensive. There genuinely is not a better moment to try this than right now, and I want to take a step back for a second, because individually, these 10 points are useful tips, but collectively they point toward the same underlying philosophy that Linux rewards intentionality. Windows and macOS are largely designed to make decisions for you quietly in the background, which feels convenient right up until the moment you want to change something and realize you never had the access to do so. And Linux hands the decisions directly to you instead, which is genuinely empowering, but it also means the burden of setting things up thoughtfully falls on you. And that is exactly why these 10 things matter, because they are the difference between months of avoidable friction and a system that quietly works exactly the way you intend it to from week one. And I want to be honest about something that does not get said enough in videos like this. You are not going to get everything right the first time, and that is completely fine. I have been doing this for 12 years, and I still occasionally second a setup decision I made years ago. And the point of this list is not to make you feel like you need to perfectly execute all 10 on day one. It is a reference point to come back to when you hit a rough patch, an update that breaks something, a document that will not format correctly, or the itch to distro hop into something shinier so you can handle it without losing your data or your sanity. And if I had to boil this down into the single highest leverage move for anyone genuinely new to this, it is the combination of those first two habits, the separate partition and the real backup routine, because once those are in place, everything else becomes dramatically lower stakes. A sketchy package causes an issue, no big deal. You have got a time shift snapshot to roll back to. And a full reinstall becomes a non-event because your files were sitting safely on their own partition the whole time. And it is worth acknowledging how far this ecosystem has come in the last year or two. Flatpak and FlatHub have matured into a genuinely reliable distribution model. VPN clients have gone from a command line headache to polished native apps, and distros like Mint and Zorin have specifically invested in font compatibility and interface familiarity in ways that target the exact friction points that used to push new switchers back to Windows within their first month. And none of that means the learning curve has vanished. It has not. But it is measurably gentler than it used to be. And if you are someone still on that fence, still running Windows or Mac OS, just watching videos like this one out of pure curiosity, I genuinely want to hear from you. What is actually holding you back from making the jump? Is it a specific piece of software you are worried will not have a Linux equivalent, a particular hardware concern, or just general uncertainty about where to even start? Tell me in the comments, because there is a genuinely good chance either myself or someone else in this community has already solved exactly the problem you're worried about. And if this video helped clear even a little of the fog around getting started, or gave you a few concrete things to fix on a system you are already running, drop a like, let me know in the comments how long you have actually been using Linux and which distro you finally landed on, because this channel is going to keep spending however long it takes helping people navigate exactly this kind of transition, from complete beginners standing at the edge for the first time to people years into their own Linux journey still quietly picking up new habits along the way.